This is a story about JV-44, a special unit of Messerschmitt 262 jet fighters. It attempts to visualize Adolf Galland's last mission. He was the former Luftwaffe General of Fighters. Galland was an outspoken critic of Goering and the Luftwaffe leadership. He had feuds going with some of the bomber commanders. Galland believed the Luftwaffe should focus on stopping the Allied bombing. He believed an advanced weapon like the Me-262 might be able to do that. Galland risked his career and his life advocating for the fighter pilots. A combination of his outspokenness and a fighter pilot's insurrection that happened in January 1945 resulted in Galland being dismissed as General of Fighters. Hitler ordered Galland to form a new Me-262 unit, separate from the influence of the Luftwaffe. JV-44 formed around the 22nd of February. 28 pilots flew to Munich on the 31st of March. At that time, they had 12 operational 262s. The Eins Volkeblog asserts that the numbers 1 through 11 were painted on the aircraft, with the 12th getting a double chevron. Galland claimed 70 aircraft from all kinds of different units were transferred to JV-44 just before the 26th of April, and they had 70 Me-262s at that time, with all different markings. Galland gives the Allies credit for a successful bombing campaign against German fuel supplies and against the rail system. He said that due to the lack of fuel, the Me-262s were towed instead of taxied to the takeoff area. A lot of the information in this video comes from Galland's book, The First and the Last, the English translation. Galland recalled a story of visiting Novotny's Me-262 base in Akmar around the 8th of November, 1944. Even at that time, piston-engine fighters were providing cover for jets as they took off and landed. At Munich Rhein Airport was typically a flight of FW-190Ds. They had unique red and white stripes to help identify them to their own anti-aircraft guns. At Novotny's base, anti-aircraft guns ringed the whole airfield. Apparently, Munich Rhein was bombed fairly often by fighter bombers and heavy bombers. Historians agree that Galland was flying White 3 on his last mission, and Schallmoser was with him. Eduard Neumann, formerly of JG-27, made a victory claim this day, so he was probably one of the 6 pilots. Steinhoff had been injured 6 days previously in a takeoff crash. The JV-44 pilots tended to rotate and share their aircraft because of the high attrition rate, and the jets were hard to maintain. as though angels were pushing. Galland's famous for that quote. Galland was allowed to choose the name for the unit, and he called it Jagdverband 44. Galland chose 44 because 44 is half the number from his Spanish Civil War unit, Jagdgruppe 88. The pilots flew in two Kettes. One pilot had to turn back because of engine problems. JV-44 received R4M rockets during the last few weeks of the war. They were held by underwing wooden racks as there was a shortage of metal. They were aimed using the normal gun sight. The R4Ms were intended to fan out and possibly take out multiple bombers at the same time. This 262 probably started out with EJG-2, an experimental commando unit, which was renamed Commando Novotny. It's believed to have transferred to JV-44 in April of 1945. The following account is from the book The First and the Last by Adolf Galland. This is the English version. It was translated. On April 26, I set out on my last mission of the war. I led 6 jet fighters of JV-44 against a formation of marauders. Our own little directing post brought us well into contact with the enemy. The weather, varying clouds at different altitudes with gaps, ground visible in about only 3/10 of the operational area. I sighted the enemy formation in the direction of Neuburg on the Danube. Once again, I noticed how difficult it was with such great difference of speed and with clouds over the landmark to find the relative flying direction between one's own plane and that of the enemy, and how difficult it was to judge the approach. This difficulty had already driven Lutzow to despair. He had discussed it repeatedly with me, and every time he missed his run-in, this most successful fighter Commodore blamed his own inefficiency as a fighter pilot. Had there been any need for more confirmation as to the hopelessness of operations with the Me-262 by bomber pilots, our experiences would have sufficed. But now there was no time for such considerations. We were flying in an almost opposite direction to the Marauder formation. Each second meant that we were 300 yards nearer. I will not say that I fought this action ideally, but I led my formation to a fairly favorable firing position. At that moment close below me, Schallmoser, the jet rammer, whizzed past. In ramming, he had made no distinction between friend or foe. And at this point, I'd like to go off on a little side story about Schallmoser. Schallmoser was a new pilot, fresh out of training, and apparently he had a problem with the speed of the Me-262 and misjudging when to fire. The B-26s were the 42nd Bomb Wing of the 12th Air Force. They included a group of Free French and 2 U.S. bomb groups, the 320th Bomb Group and the 17th Bomb Group. I wasn't able to identify the French bomber unit, but I think there were only a half dozen that flew B-26s. Not sure if they had U.S. or French insignia. I was surprised. The B-26 seems to have some ventral guns. Doesn't look like visibility was very good for the gunner, though. On the 20th of April, Eduard Schallmoser clipped a B-26 propeller with his rudder and bailed out. He claimed he landed in his mother's garden. On April 4th, he rammed a P-38 and was able to land his heavily damaged White 5 back at the base. His comrades in JV-4 nicknamed him the Rammer. The ramming wasn't intentional. It was a target fixation sort of a thing. Okay, back to Galland's narrative. Safety catch off the gun and rocket switch. Already at a great distance, we met with considerable defensive fire. As usual in a dogfight, I was tense and excited. I forgot to release the second safety catch for the rockets. They did not go off. I was in the best firing position. This is looking at the previous scene of Galland's first B-26 attack from a different perspective. I forgot to release the second safety catch for the rockets. They did not go off. I was in the best firing position. I had aimed accurately and pressed my thumb flat on the release button with no result. Maddening for any fighter pilot. Anyhow, my 4 3-centimeter cannons were working. They had much more firing power than we'd been used to so far. This engagement had lasted only a fraction of a second, a very important second to be sure. One marauder of the last string was on fire and exploded. Now I attacked another bomber in the van of the formation. Now I attacked another bomber in the van of the formation. It was heavily hit as I passed very close above it. During this breakthrough, I got a few minor hits from the defensive fire, but now I wanted to know definitely what was happening to the second bomber I had hit. I was not quite clear if it had crashed. So far, I had not noticed any fighter escort. Above the formation I had attacked last, I banked steeply to the left, and at this moment it happened. A hail of fire enveloped me. A Mustang had caught me napping. A sharp rap hit my right knee. The instrument panel with its indispensable instruments was shattered. The right engine was also hit. Its metal covering worked itself loose in the wind and was partly carried away. Finnegan said he was escorting Allied bombers when he saw two objects come zipping through the formation, and two bombers blew up immediately. I watched the two objects go through the bomber formation and thought, that can't be a prop job. It's got to be one of those new Messerschmitt 262 jets. He fired off a 3-second burst, then hit the throttle on his P-47 and found I was going so fast I went right through everything, and guessed my speed at about 450 plus miles per hour. Finnegan figured he hit one of the German jets, but wasn't sure, so he recorded it as a probable. Now the left engine was hit too. I could hardly hold her in the air. In this embarrassing situation, I had only one wish: to get out of this crate, which now apparently was only good for dying in. But then I was paralyzed by the terror of being shot while parachuting down. Experience had taught us that we jet fighter pilots had to reckon on this. I soon discovered that my battered Me-262 could be steered again after some adjustments. After a dive through the layer of cloud, I saw the Autobahn below. Ahead of me lay Munich, and to the left, Rheims. In a few seconds, I was over the airfield. It was remarkably quiet and dead below. Having regained my self-confidence, I gave the customary wing wobble and started banking to come in. One engine did not react at all to the throttle. I couldn't reduce it. Just before the edge of the airfield, I therefore had to cut both engines. A long trail of smoke drifted behind me. Only at this moment I noticed that thunderbolts in a low-level attack were giving our airfield the works. Now I had no choice. I had not heard the warnings of our ground post because my wireless had faded out when I was hit. There remained only one thing to do: straight down into the fireworks. Touching down, I realized the tire of my nose wheel was flat. It rattled horribly as Earth again received me at a speed of 150 miles per hour on the small landing strip. Brake! Brake! The kite would not stop. But at last I was out of the kite and into the nearest bomb crater. There were plenty of them on our runways. Bombs and rockets exploded all around. Bursts of shells from the thunderbolts whistled and banged. A new low-level attack. Out of the fastest fighter in the world and into a bomb crater. That was an utterly wretched feeling. Fireworks, an armored tractor came rushing across to me. It pulled up sharply close by. One of our mechanics. Quickly, I got in behind him. He turned and raced off on the shortest route away from the airfield. In silence, I slapped him on the shoulder. He understood better what I wanted to say than any words about the unity between flying and ground personnel could have expressed. The other pilots who took part in this operation were directed to neighboring airfields or came into Rheims after the attack. We reported 5 certain kills without loss to ourselves. I had to go to Munich to a hospital for treatment of my scratched knee. The x-ray showed 2 splinters in the kneecap. It was put in a plaster, a fine business. I believe official records show that Galland was credited with 2 victories and Neumann with 1. Other sources indicate 4 B-26s were lost and 6 damaged. 2 Me-262s were downed, including Galland's, with both pilots surviving. I thought the Eins Falke blog post had some interesting information about JV-44. You're showing Me-262s hidden in forests along the Autobahn between Munich and Salzburg. Here's an Allied reconnaissance photo of the Munich Riem airport as it appeared in 1945. The airport was built in 1939. Note all the bomb craters. Apparently, JV-44 had its own unique unit emblem. Here's another interpretation of what Galland's aircraft might have looked like. Here's a photograph of White 3, the aircraft that Galland flew, along with White 6 at Riem. This is a photograph of the second White 5, believed to have been flown by Stahlmoser. That's Stahlmoser walking behind the other pilot. And White 6 is in the background underneath the camouflage net. These are an assortment of B-26s from the 42nd Bombardment Wing. This is an actual photograph of James Finnegan's P-47. Finnegan is the pilot who shot up Galland's aircraft. An Australian museum has a Me-262. It was captured by the British after the war. The British painted roundels on it, and in the 50s the Australians painted some kind of camouflage scheme on it. And restorers have apparently managed to remove the paint that was added to expose the original camouflage. Here's another color photo of an Me-262. A few days after this mission, at the end of April, the JV-44 Me-262s in Munich Riem were moved to two primitive fields in Austria, to Innsbruck and Salzburg. Galland was negotiating with the U.S. Army Air Force to transfer the Me-262s under his command. In his book, Galland blames the negotiation failure on couriers who were involved, and the result was that JV-44 Me-262s were mostly blown up on the 3rd of May by their own unit. Well, in rereading Galland's book and doing some research on JV-44, I learned a few things. I hope you enjoyed this story as much as I did.